Thanks very much for joining us for this session, which of course will be the best of the entire festival. We've got here an incredibly eminent panel of commissioners from the arts. I mean, I don't know what the collective noun would be for that, a yentob of commissioners. And we're going to be discussing some really crucial things because, of course, arts and television has just suddenly become massively rebooted. We'll be discussing why and if that's the case. So we've got some really big questions to ask around about that, about how we're going to move beyond the perceptions of the arts being bound by class and culture, if indeed they are, and of course what the future is for art and television, because the way we view things, even just the way that we actually consume it has become so different, and how we get the right balance between populist appeal and the fascinating niche that we expect from the arts. We'll also be talking about how important on-screen talent is and how we get distinct voices, and how we represent the various important institutions, organisations and events that we know need to be covered by the arts. Now, it seems ridiculous because we all know that the arts in general are terribly good for us, but both on television and even just to consume them in the normal fashion, but so is cod liver oil. So we need to really discuss how important this is, whether there's any cynicism in arts programming just now, or whether it's being done for altruistic reasons. So let me introduce you first of all to the panel. Here from ABC is Mandy Chang, and next to her Celia Taylor from Sky Arts, John Hay from Channel 4, Mark Bell from BBC, and Donald Thomas from PBS. I'm going to ask each of the panellists in turn to show you a little clip reel, basically, and then set out their stall. So basically, they'll be pitching to you for a change, what will be rather refreshing. So Mandy, just want to start?
Mm-hmm. So am I setting out my stall first?
Show us your clips first and then
okay.
Talk us through them.
All right.
What the hell?
So that's part of our, we have a strand called The Hive, which is a kind of experimental program, and that's a full-on drama that came out of that. And what that's about is we do a lab with practitioners from other areas of the arts, so theatre, choreography, fine arts, art, visual arts, and the very best of those get commissioned to make a film, and that is a clip from one of the films, and it's a coming-of-age story. Those three girls at the end of the school bitches, and
yeah, we worked that out.
and it's and it's a theatre director, it's a children's theatre director, kind of made this film, and it's a really beautiful film set in the 70s. It's got this magical reality world, and it's this girl trapped between girlhood and womanhood. And it's a really lovely film. It's got its flaws, but it's a really great way of finding new talent.
And the really interesting thing about ABC is that the compulsory part of your charter is actually the only one that's prescribed is the arts, which is really unusual, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's we can say you've got to do this. Yeah. Well, I can say you've got to do this to my superiors because it's in the charter. So
just in one sentence, how would you really sort of describe your arts commissioning vision, if you like, for ABC?
Mm-hmm. Our vision is it's very eclectic, so it's kind of mainstream. We do 2 big series a year. We do a strand of one-off 1-hour docs, which is kind of inspired by Storyville, and it's the best arts docs, complete mix of programs from architecture to choreography to, great Australian artists. And a lot of those, some of those, I mean, we've done quite a few co-pros with Mark.
Yeah.
So we did Brilliant Creatures, and was that what it was called in?
No, I think we called it Wizards of Oz, actually.
Rebels
of Oz.
Rebels of Oz.
We changed it around. Sorry,
and we call it Brilliant Creatures. and we also did another big strand called Art of Australia, which didn't have any British content, but Mark, again, supported it and had an Australian presenter. But there was it coincided with the big exhibition at the Royal Academy.
Good. Well, we'll come back to talking about co-pros in a minute. I mean, let's just go round the room set back. Celia, hit us with something.
This is Guitar Star.
Woo! So, well, I mean, Sky Arts. Woo!
Yeah, we're rocking it. We always have this joke that we're trying to drag the channel into the 1990s. But I think with this, we've actually dragged it right bang into today. And I just love this because I suppose why it feels very Sky Arts project It's unabashedly a music programme. It's about talent, it's about skill, it's about honouring the technique of a craft, but it's also about all of us who have guitars hanging on the back of your door, or in the case of my husband, one in the attic, and it just feels so kind of open to everybody. And it's about people doing and enjoying art, and it's not about yet another middle-class white man walking down a road telling me stuff, which has sort of been quite a lot of art output. So I suppose we're just trying to sort of do something that's populist and mainstream, but with some of the best genius talent. So so it is a proper arts programme.
And is that really the vision for Sky Arts? Because of course you're about to do this major launch of bringing 1 and 2 together.
Yes, so we relaunch on June the 9th, so we're making 2 channels into 1. So rather than having 2 smaller channels, we're making 1 monster channel. And then also, which we can talk more about later maybe, but there's going to be a huge download offering that goes alongside Sky Arts, because if you love opera, we have buckets of it. If you love rock, we'll have loads of it. So I can talk a bit more about the strategy behind that. But yes, I think, Sky Arts, it's about, we recognise that not everybody loves every art form, and we recognise that somebody values heavy metal as much as they do classical ballet, and that is all right in the arts world. So it's about super serving all those people and their passions. Really.
Good. Great. John, Channel 4, sure something terrifying and dangerous.
A reel, shall we?
Well,
Good.
Still cutting edge.
Yeah. It's a bit of a longer reel. I wanted to sort of show it to try and give a sense of sort of where we're coming from, because I think our strategy and our approach has come into focus a bit in the last year and a half. I guess we're quite different to the other guys on the panel. We're not trying to do a broad range of stuff. We're trying to do something very, very focused and particular, because that's our sort of job, I think, is to sort of offer something different. And that different thing is sort of the reverse of what's traditionally been considered arts programming. So we don't want to do any programmes about artists or about the arts world. We're trying to do programmes where the artists are the authors. And the subject matter is sort of broad non-art subjects of the kinds that we'd make into a 9 o'clock doc. So if you look at our output, I mean, in there, there's kind of, the recent programming has been about the legalisation of gay marriage, it's Our Gay Wedding the Musical. There's been Identity Politics, Who Are You, the Grace and Perry series, Essex Women, the other Grace and Perry project, the election, the vote, going back a bit, this sort of 9/11, rebuilding the World Trade Centre, mental health, notes from the inside. That's what we're sort of trying to do. So if I'm pitching to you, the 2 things I'm really after are sort of documentary access and stories of the kinds that you would pitch even if it weren't an arts programme at sort of 9. And that needs to be broad enough and hooky enough to sort of work there. And then artists, and when I say artists, I mean like musicians and dancers and photographers and everything, who are engaged enough with the world to go in there and open it up in a different way through their process. Because that's sort of what's happening there, I think, when it works. I mean, my favourite ever art stock is Jeremy Deller's Battle of Orgreave. It's childish to have a favourite, isn't it? But I sort of love it. And we arranged a screening of it last year, and I just think it made me see the miners' strike differently. And that's sort of what good art does, and that's what we're trying to do with this.
Great, thanks. Mark, BBC, the grand old man of the arts.
Thanks, Muriel.
Let's see how it's going.
That's so kind of you. I just tried to stick to the time, John. It's a short but action-packed little clip reel showing some of the things, a very small amount of the very many things that the BBC does in the arts.
So where are we with it?
Well, it's obviously it's there to show some of the range of what it is we do. Obviously, we have a slightly different arrangement. I'm responsible only for television, so but it is 3 channels predominantly, BBC 1 through to BBC 4. And the important thing that we're trying to do is reach as many people as possible with a range of arts output that will engage as many people. So there's a lot of range there, a lot of different approaches. I think the BBC should be doing that. We'll continue to do everything from topical coverage through to big feature-length documentaries and events and some theatre, but we do have a very powerful drama department who does a lot of that themselves. Music on the whole, I've slightly strayed into music there a little bit, but on the whole that's Jan, my colleague, who does it. Obviously that's her area. But overall, what we're here to do is reflect the arts of Britain and the world, back to Britain predominantly, to understand, explain, contextualise where possible, and to make programs that feel as though they genuinely are both inside the art world, but not in an exclusive way, to try and give as many people as possible, as many entry points as possible to the arts that people make and have made in the past, I suppose.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Well, flitting effortlessly across the Atlantic, Thomas.
So what's
PBS.
interesting is that I think we are, well, I'll tell you what, let's see the reel. This
Sorry,
is kind
Donald,
of
I called you
Donald.
Thomas.
That's
I know,
all right.
sorry.
It's,
that sounded really rude, like you were eating. Thomas!
no, it's I had a name tag. So this is a pure overview of probably the last year in arts programming on PBS. So that was another reel. As a matter of fact, so that wasn't the reel I thought would be on. So these three...
We're so professional.
So the reel that was going to be on was a kind of a minute and a half of all the arts programs, the scissor reel. This is from 3 programs that we're airing in the fall. And besides all the series that we do, I'm able to curate a 6 to 11 week series called the PBS Arts Fall Festival, where we put a spotlight on really big, high-level, high-energy performance programs, whether or not they're dance or theater or in this case, these are 2 theater pieces, Showboat and Act One from Broadway. And the first one is an interesting thing that got sent to me, and it is a Latin tribute to Michael Jackson that grew from 2 years ago of little interest to a massive amount of interest, and partly because the Latino audience is growing in the United States. And so stations who are in Texas and California called me and said, what about that Latin show? And so as it turned out, it's an amazing concert that we're shooting in a couple of weeks. So the way PBS operates, so we do have series that have been on in the arts that have been on for 30 or 40 years, whether or not it's great performances or American Masters or in performance at the White House. We do a massive amount of arts programming. PBS is America's public television network, where stations, 300 stations out in America, we work for them managing their national affairs. They get much of their donations through arts programs. So even though we do history, natural history, science, and news and public affairs, more donations from America's public come from the arts program. So, and we do a fair amount of them. We often argue sometimes that more people watch dance on So You Think You Can Dance than they do on in any other place. But yet, though, they would consider that arts program, and we probably wouldn't, in essence. So we'll talk about that too.
Okay, Tom, thank you. Right, well, as I was set out there still, let's open up the conversation really to the arts whence. We're all saying, and everybody's saying, what an amazing renaissance there is in arts programming right now. And a lot of us are blaming you, Sky, for actually having set that agenda. Your DG has said he wants to put arts at the absolute total centre of BBC programming. How much of this is true? Maybe this is just a perception that there's some new renaissance, or maybe it's just cynical programmers going, actually, we have to follow Sky because they're selling boxes.
Well, I mean, we're doing it because we want to do it. We're not doing it because we have to do it. And I think, you know, for us, we're a subscription basis, and we know there are lots of people who love arts programming. So, you know, there's a very simple equation that we're doing. And I think it's brilliant that actually, you know, Sky Arts were compared to the power that the other terrestrial broadcasters have. The fact that we can actually lead that debate and that agenda and actually push people to put arts centre, I think it's a really valuable and very exciting thing for us to do. And it's, you know, and then when they start copying us as well, that's kind of even more flattering.
What can you possibly mean, Celia?
I'm ready to come in on this.
What format would that
really
be?
Flattering. I can't imagine. So it's brilliant that we can punch above our weight. And also, I think, you know, collectively, but I think what's the most important thing is that we don't get into a tit-for-tat thing because, you know, we all collectively, I hope, care for the arts. And so actually it's really important that we all support each other and that we all back each other because, especially as you think, though, in the next 5 years, in this period of a Tory government, that actually standing up and backing the arts is really, really important. So I think all of us are in that together.
Well, but the BBC were very comfortable before you came along with this newfangled arts idea with Sky. And they were indeed, very famous for the white middle-class man going on a journey. Have they kicked life into you? You copied them.
I dispute that. I mean, I think that, if anybody, if anybody's taking ownership of a competition format, you can go quite a long way back into history. And, there's been quite a lot of challenges over the years, in the kitchen, at the easel, all over the place. So, significant differences and all the rest of it. The most important thing, I think, is that the BBC pretty much invented the arts documentary. We've been doing it since pretty much television started. Yes, the most famous early arts programme was presented by a white, middle-aged male, and it was Civilization, probably, but it was, to some extent, a benchmark that we're not ashamed of. Since then, an enormous range of programming has happened, and I think that's a great thing. I don't feel threatened by Sky. I celebrate Sky's existence. I think it's fantastic that Sky Arts exists. I think it's terrific for the arts ecology. I think it has, many people go to Sky and watch arts programmes, which is terrific. I don't think it puts them off watching other programmes elsewhere. I think the fact that we are pretty much the only broadcaster in the world that gets the numbers to arts programmes that we get. I don't blush at the fact that we can get over 4 million viewers to broad arts programmes on BBC One, through to very specialised, and I'm not in the least bit embarrassed about the numbers we get on BBC Four, where we'll get hundreds of thousands of people coming to quite specialised arts programming. That's what the BBC's for. We have always been there to celebrate range and breadth. Okay, we have been keen to get new presenters, bring new presenters on. I hope you saw from that sizzle reel that there are quite a range of new presenters coming. There are quite a lot of quite established presenters. Simon Sharma's a terrific presenter. Because of his ethnicity, should we dump him? I don't think so, because I think he's terrific, and I would like to find space for him and others to continue to make arts programmes on the BBC. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Great, I've made you bristle. That's fantastic. Yeah, I was actually going to come to you because you actually made the real point that in terms of presenting arts programmes, you want the protagonists and the artists themselves to be the people.
author,
yeah, but in a way, I find that slightly peculiar because that's not their medium. I mean, why should somebody who is actually articulate in one way be articulate in another? I mean, Grayson is very unusual.
Tell that to Grayson.
He's so unusual, though.
But there are different ways of doing it, aren't there? I mean,
white middle class, white middle-aged man.
Well, let's leave that alone. Come on. Let's leave the male ethnicity thing we've done.
I mean,
but as an artist, it's unusual.
People do it in different ways, don't they? Benjamin and Nathan, when they wrote and performed Their Wedding as a musical, they weren't doing a Grayson. They were sort of creating an event that marked a moment in sort of rights history in this country. And James Graham and Josie Rourke, when they did The Vote, they also weren't doing a Grayson. So I mean, there are lots of different ways of coming at it. I sort of think, to get to your first question, really, that momentum's an important thing in telly. And so it's good for all of us. If you give a toss about the arts, it's really good that you're, going big on it, and that Tony Hall's standing up and saying stuff about it. And we live in quite a good, to me, quite a well-segmented market now, right? I mean, if you're a viewer, if I'm a viewer, I want to know what I'm getting from each channel. I feel I do. I've got a really strong sense of what each one's doing. But for us, it's done out of, it's done out of love. It's done out of desire to fulfil the remit. The remit's, we're a not-for-commercial, not-for-profit. We exist to sort of deliver the remit. And the remit has all sorts of stuff in about innovation, about alternative voices. So there's no better way to do that than going to the most imaginative, sort of subversive, creative minds in the country and putting them in the driving seat. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, a lot of people got a little bit concerned about Channel 4 though not actually following its remit and actually chasing viewers, when in fact it shouldn't have, because I mean, used to, in the early days, it was all about that, and who cared whether they watched or not? I know, because hardly anyone watched what we did. No, still got another series. So how viewer-led are you? I mean, realistically, you can't actually put out things that don't get any viewers.
There's no shame in chasing viewers. I mean, it's telly, isn't it? That's the sort of, that's the point of it, is to get the good stuff to as many people as possible. So I would not feel embarrassed about that.
But the arts is necessarily niche. I mean, it just is necessarily niche. I mean, you never get a big broad base unless you actually, do what we're talking. Donald was talking about, actually sort of presenting something as arts when it isn't actually. I
don't know if I agree. Actually, I sort of think that the features sort of shading end of it has always been more popular, so sort of competition formats and things. I mean, if you might as well, if you're doing that, then we'll count Grand Designs. Sort of there's a sort of that end of creativity in a sort of heavily formatted space has always been more popular than the other. But I don't think it needs to be niche. I think, in fact, if it stays niche, it'll die. I mean, that's why we're trying to sort of go out and our arts programme is about engaging, but we sort of, if you can ask someone like Grayson to tackle a subject that you might make a 9 o'clock doc about, you've got engagement without compromising the art itself. I think the really dangerous route that you're alluding, if this is what you're alluding to, is you say, look, we're only going to do pop music because that is the only thing that's broad enough. Whereas I want some quite weird stuff in there, in the mix, and I think we've got enough. I mean, I should also mention, random acts. So there's that's not an audience-chasing enterprise. Our metrics are sort of impact, quality, and audience.
Yeah.
So we just, we try and sort of just put the best. I would like to get the best stuff to as many people as possible. That's my job, I think.
Well, both Donald and you've culturally, you've both pinpointed the fact that you can have a much broader base idea of what encompasses the arts, and that in that way, perhaps you bring in new audiences. Is that fair enough to say that?
Yeah, and we do get really great audiences in Australia. We get our arts content gets put out in prime time, and we had the highest rating documentary last year was an arts documentary on the ABC. So, which is pretty good, and it means we're punching above our weight. And
it's getting harder to define, though, isn't it? Because it used to be where you just go the kind of Gabby Alison. I grew up in Kenneth Clark Art School, and everyone had to sit through slide lectures. So we all started very far away and came towards you. And that was the absolute paradigm of what an arts documentary was like, and the things that you both showed us tonight are just so far away from that. And I just wonder if that's a deliberate move now by television arts commissioning to actually bring everything in.
I think for us is that we, besides these big, massive series that we do, we still do series on the visual arts, and we do American Masters, which are documentaries about the artists, icons in America. We do it all because PBS is a big variety service. So while to be honest with you, I probably prefer the big performance series, but yet we do as many docs as anyone. We actually, when we think about the documentaries, we almost don't call them art. So I think though it's just listening to all of you, just the definition of what art is, as a matter of fact, because we do these great performances, whether they're ballet or modern dance or jazz or blues, or we have all those genres. And I can tell you is that we've got people who will only watch jazz, who will only come to us for dance. Because I think one of you just said, it's like we know art is not for everybody. And so we put them on the same night, Friday nights at 9 o'clock. And you can see the numbers go up and down based on what kind of art it is. So we do go after numbers. And I wish say we don't, but we do. It's what we promise the stations, that we'll actually give them as much viewers as we can. But part of what we also do is the fact that we also offer station engagement after each program. So the stations are not only just airing the program, but they actually may be doing programs that are surrounding it in the community. So that's part of what PBS does.
What are the programs that each of you make that you envy? I mean, you think, God, I wish I'd done that. I mean, I'm keeping you two out of that, okay? And you're not allowed to say Grayson either.
I am going to say Grayson. Because we buy all of Grayson's programs. I mean, and I saw Our Gay Wedding, the musical, and loved it.
That's great.
And thought it was a really original piece of programming. It was beautifully made, and it was about a really kind of contemporary subject, and that's the kind of thing we aspire to too. But then I love, we buy a lot of BBC docs as well. We buy, we're buying the David Hockney feature-length doc that that Mark's department did, and there's a lot of BBC stuff, but there's a lot of Channel 4 stuff as well. And I'm actually really jealous of the ecology that these guys have, because we don't. Well, Foxtel have just started an arts channel, but it's very, very different to. There's a lot of buy-ins. It's a lot of kind of proscenium arch. You're just filming a performance, and that's not what we do. And I'd really like some more competition for the arts.
How about you, Celia? What do you
lust
after?
I want your disco dancing one. I think it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I think it's there isn't a lot to pick. I think is the truth. I think I'm sort of sitting here and racking my brain, and sometimes you're kind of frozen by choice, and actually I'm sort of frozen by lack of choice. Because I think we do need a kind of re-energising of arts programme. You think how many people buy tickets to actually go and see live music or performance, and I think something like 53% of the population engage in a cultural activity every year. and yet it still feels like arts programming is sort of a bit like homework. And I think that's wrong. And actually, we need to collectively make arts programming as exciting as going to see a gig. So I suppose my challenge would be, can you ask me that if I'm here next year? And hopefully all of us, I'll be able to pick something that all of us have done as sort of really innovative, exciting new arts programming, because I don't think we're there at the moment.
Interesting. John?
Well, I mean, there's lots that I admire. It's not much I envy because of trying to do, you know, to have this mission to try and do what everyone else isn't doing, right? So it would be sort of weird if there was something on another channel that would be on for. We wouldn't be doing our job right. But there's lots I admire. I mean, I think Portrait Artist is a great show, really well made, and really, really enjoyable watch. I think the, I mean, everyone's going to say they're Hockney, aren't they? Because it's such a wonderful film, and the Freud film before it, and the Rembrandt, Sharma and Rembrandt, they're really classy docs. I mean, they're fantastic. That performance of Old Man River, I was getting sort of hairs at the back of my neck. I mean, there's lots of good stuff about, right? It's just a sort of, yeah, it's just not us. But I'm a bit more optimistic about it than you are. I don't think that, and I'm an intensity junkie, sort of in the stuff I watch and the stuff I commission. That's what I like, and I don't feel like there's anything homeworky in the Channel 4 arts output. So.
No, I don't, but I think the public do. And if you ask them that, that's kind of what they say.
That's not the feedback I get, but yeah.
I think it's a challenge putting arts into the title. You know, we've got BBC Arts, Sky Arts. It's called Sky Arts. I think it brings a particular audience, and I think that audience is fairly self-defining and quite small. And I don't have a problem with that. I think people who define themselves as arts lovers are a particular group. I don't think that means that all arts programmes should be made for those people and those people alone. I think absolutely it should be broadened out. I think what is interesting about arts programming now is I think that, as you can see from the clips we've been looking at, people, you know, art is being redefined around us. People are broadening the definition of what art means, both in a gallery, in the theatre, what theatre is, the whole, you know, prom theatre experience. You know, there is a sort of cultural revolution going on. I think it's extremely exciting. How best to reflect that on a television is something we're all struggling with. I completely agree with, you know, actually John and Celia there, that we need to find new ways of, you know, putting theatre on the telly, very, very difficult to make it feel like it's as good as when you're in the theatre. It's a different experience. How do we somehow break down that kind of screen between you and the event? We're all thinking about that a lot. I'm hoping that technology will liberate us from the kind of, some of that film that comes between us and the art. I think it's a challenge and a problem, and I don't think there isn't necessarily an answer, but I think we should be looking for it. And if I am envious of anyone, I think Grayson is a tremendous presenter, and he's really terrific and special. To be honest, I'm most jealous on a daily basis of what Jan gets to commission on the music side because, you know, I love a lot of what she does, and that's a little bit self-regarding, I know, in terms of BBC response, but I might as well be honest. Donald, I love what you do too.
So
I have not watched what they do. I mean, I'm across the pond, but we have just entered in a relationship with the BBC, and it is a working relationship, and I'm getting to see the programs that they're getting pitched, and how do we then take projects that are intended for the BBC or for their British audience, and then translate them into America, and will it be the same? Because to be quite honest with you, if Americans don't know who it is, they're not going to watch. It's you know, Margie's here, and Margie did a film for us on Prince Charles and the art that's come out of the royal family. Well, that people knew Prince Charles, and so it did really well for us, as a matter of fact. But it is still trying to find programs that we believe the American audience will watch. You know, I like the fact that I do programs that clearly every New Yorker will watch any art program that we do. It doesn't matter. They're ingrained in it. They're born with arts and music in their blood, it seems like. But you go to the middle of America, and they're not. They don't care about it. So how do we, in essence, do programs that we, in essence, would love to say we are enriching their lives, which is bullshit. What I think we're doing is that we are attempting to bring them programs that maybe they have not seen before, and in a way that does not appear to be, you know, posh.
But you're compromising it, you're dumbing down for the flyover states there.
I think you try not to dumb down to it, but okay. You know, if we're doing a museum piece, you know, in the old days, you'd have a presenter who would walk you through a museum and you'd see the pieces. Well, nobody wants to do that anymore. But yet, though, we have a I wonder if it's yours or not. We have this great presenter, you know, who actually is a British presenter, and she walks through. It's Judy Worsley?
Lucy? Yeah, she's one of ours.
She's one of you. You know, and Americans love it because, you know,
So
she's kind of funny and
territorial.
irreverent in that sense. So it's still trying to find, because you never want to talk down to anybody. So it's how do you kind of enrich it, but make it better?
Well, that actually brings up a point. I mean, are we actually managing in all of this? We're enthused, we're, you know, a little bit optimistic and pessimistic, but are we actually doing anything to break down those perceptions of class and elitism that seems to have surrounded art for so many years? Because we're all saying here that art's changing, and it is, because our perception of what's encompassed within that definition has changed. So what are we doing collectively to break that down? I mean, we can see what you're doing, but you know, in some respects, not really, because that particular Guardian class is always going to be part of that too. You're not exactly selling it to the same people that watch.
I think we're going beyond that. So, the last two things on that reel have been huge sort of rating success for us. The Grayson House. Which didn't feel remotely, it felt the opposite of elitist. In fact, most of the Grayson stuff feel like the opposite of elitist.
But it's still a million viewers, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
effectively, it's that million viewers we're talking about.
It's a million plus. Actually, it's up at 1.3 on Crucible. It's the same that Hallam was doing in the same slot. The vote on More For got us 85% up on slot average. I mean, they're working. We're also doing something active about it, right? So Random Acts this year, in its relaunch, is part of a partnership with the Arts Council. £6 million over 3 years. And 3 million of that is going directly into setting up 5 centres around the country that will find and develop new talent amongst people who don't normally get an in into filmmaking. So that's a sort of explicit, you know, you talk about, you can calibrate the programmes one way or the other to try and reach out. This is a sort of injection of cash into reaching out, into opening the doors of television and creative filmmaking to people who don't normally get there. So we're doing our best on that, I think.
Yeah. But you might be, I mean, in a sense, it's almost patronising itself, touching on a way to break down class barriers, because it's like, I mean, sometimes elitism is not elitism, it's just excellence. You know, and so that's just what it has to be, and that's the amount of people who love that. Because you mean, for instance, I mean, take Grand Designs as an example. This is off the top of my head. I'm thinking of something that actually educated the public, actually educated people how to view modern architecture, because you're required to do that. And I'm afraid, being an arts graduate, you do sometimes require to be educated in how to appreciate the arts. It's not actually that simple. You know, you look at the Tate bricks, you have to be taught what minimalism, you know, or Duchamp was saying. So, is that patronising to not give them that opportunity to learn?
I think it's that arts word. I mean, you know, interesting, we're relaunching the channel, so obviously we've been doing a whole load of analysis. And what's really interesting, there's sort of two groups of people. There's a sector of people who go, Sky, you know, it'll be down market. And there's the other section that kind of go, art, that's not for me, that's for posh people. And that's our fundamental challenge, is how we can get those two people understanding that actually, you know, heavy metal has as much validity as Rembrandt or something. And it's okay to not like both of those things. And I think that's really what our big message is. I don't know if you've seen our new marketing campaign. That's kind of what it's about.
Right. I mean, I do think that there are people, as soon as you hear arts, they're moving away. I mean, they don't want to watch them, as a matter of fact. And for our case, is that we get so many people, so many rich people who donate to the arts. And you feel like you want to present the arts that they would like, which is really kind of talking about the finite issues of a piece of art, which is like watching paint dry.
But you don't change the art. You don't change the arts just because people are walking away, though, because otherwise you just end up with Britain's Got Talent. And so the whole point is you have to retain the integrity of the
I totally agree with that.
I totally agree.
I think that, you know, you need to try and aim for excellence, and I don't think there's anything wrong with excellence in whatever field, whether it's heavy metal or, you know, classical ballet. That's absolutely fine. I don't think it needs to be exclusive, and I think you need to find ways where it feels not exclusive. And I think that the important thing is, I think genuinely people want to, you know, feel as though they understand where the person on the telly is coming from, either because they're very good at explaining themselves or because they're a bit like them. And I think that's absolutely fine and absolutely right and what we should be aiming for. I think that it is important for us you know, the BBC is a big cultural organisation. It makes arts all over the place. You know, the fact that BBC Drama make Parade's End would, on another channel, possibly be part of the arts package. Actually, we should not get too slavishly stuck into these genres, because actually I think broadly we're talking about culture here, but what we are trying to talk about in this particular panel is how do we describe, you know, what it is we do. And on the whole, obviously I don't really look after the heavy metal side of things, and I'm here, luckily,
heavy metal side of things.
I love your Latin Michael Jackson, but, you know, look, I'm not here to commission heavy metal docs, so don't bring them to me, because I've got other people who look after them at the BBC. But, you know, I still think that, you know, we need to be as broad as we possibly can be in this area.
But I think it's also, you see it in the commercial world, don't you? You know, the West End's been doing it for the last 5 years. They bring Hollywood stars over and put them in some serious plays, and they sell out. And, you know, and Sky Arts, you know, we've done scripted projects with, you know, Daniel Radcliffe, and it does, and you can get extraordinary talent to come and do one-off passion projects, or you know, to actually direct or creatively get involved in the arts. So I think there's, you know, there are ways of actually getting a broad audience by sometimes doing, you know, stealing ideas from the commercial world of using amazing talent, huge Hollywood actors or performers. So I think you definitely do that. And I think the other thing is that we're trying to show people doing stuff rather than somebody telling you about stuff. And I think that's a fundamental shift. So you're actually recognising that there is excellence out there, but it doesn't have to be delivered through the funnel of one expert. And I think you see that in our
It does sometimes.
Portrait Artist of the Year.
I don't think there's anything wrong with expertise.
It's about having that mixed economy.
Absolutely.
But I think, you know, in Portrait Artist of the Year, they're all really, really good artists.
Yeah.
And we're doing Landscape Artist of the Year now. They're all really, really good painters. They just happen to be amateurs, but we treat them with the same respect and reverence as we would with a professional artist. I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we all know the trick in this room, right? The trick is the frame, isn't it? Appropriately for an arts sort of panel. But I mean, I always think of the example of, it's a completely separate genre, but in documentaries, Channel 4 commissioned a series called 999 What's Your Emergency? And the first series was basically about social breakdown in Blackpool. But if it had been sold as social breakdown in Blackpool, it would have tanked. But as it was, they sold it through the proscenium march around it was inside the call centre at the moment when the calls come in and the most excitement, you know. So the pre-title was brilliant and it did 3 million, right? So we do the same trick. So The Votes is it's a new play, a brand new commission. It's a radical innovation because it's a real-time drama shot on a fixed rig for the first time anyone's done that.
Huge stars.
You know, and yeah, but as you say, Judi Dench saying fuck really helps. You know, that's the sort of trick, isn't it? That you sort of...
You can't get enough of that, right?
And riding off the back of the election and the energy of that moment. And so, you know, so we're all in that game. I think if you get the front right, you can get as subtle and as complex as you like in the back, but it's the front.
But what's emerging here is actually the frisson of competition actually means that you complement each other incredibly well. Because if you all start trying to chase the same thing, that's when arts goes down the plug hole. Would you think that's right?
Playground football.
No, seriously, because when people keep going, oh, it's really, really terrible, so you're sort of chasing each other. But actually, that's what's making it vibrant. Because if you weren't getting cross with Sky, then people wouldn't be doing other things. And you just absolutely refuse to do any kind of art history at all.
Yeah.
And that's really an incredibly brave thing for Channel 4 to do, because, you know, it wasn't ever thus. So
it's delivering on our remit. I mean, you know, why would I duplicate? Sort of, there's a gap. So go for the gap.
yeah. Well, so in that case, I mean, we're all big mates and nobody's in competition.
Sorry.
Yeah,
But, you know, except that, you know, in the United States, there is nobody else doing arts programs. I mean, there's, again, though, we would consider art what we do, but I would consider So You Think You Can Dance art. The Voice, as a matter of fact, some people would say that's arts program. You would not see that on PBS. Because if you did, there are people saying, wow, what are you doing? Everyone else is doing that, or the commercial channels are doing it. We always have to walk this fine line that we're not commercial television, and we don't do competition shows, although we just did the Great British Bake Off.
Oh, that's real art.
You know, and you know, I didn't buy it, but I can tell you that it's our stations, when we bought it, they were outraged, and now it's doing well for them, so.
No, they love it, right?
Say love
Change their tune.
I mean, I think there's just one thing to add to that. It's really interesting that, I mean, I think the significant difference is that, on the whole, you know, the BBC's channels are mixed genre and go from cookery competitions through drama to arts programmes, and they're all mixed up in the schedule. And I think that is in the hope that people will come to the overall, because in the end, if you like arts programming, it doesn't mean you don't like documentaries. What did I say? Oh, God.
Oh, Lord.
For God's sake, like, you're so
Is that a typical BBC show?
That's what happens every time I but I think that the idea of a mixed ecology on a channel is important, and I think that we hope that by keeping the genres mixed up, you give more people the range that they expect out of their general interests. Most people like sport and art. Most people like opera and possibly a bit of, you know, rock music or rap. You know, let's face it, we're all of a generation where we consume all of this stuff. I'm sure you don't like one and not the other.
Yeah. No, we're multicultural, really.
Okay.
But before anyone else leaves, by the way, I'm going to open the floor to questions in about 10
What did you
minutes, all
say?
right?
What did I say?
So
Yeah.
don't go.
I'll keep
You're going
quiet
to get a chance to ask him questions in a minute. It's just got one more thing I want to deal with, and then I'm going to open the floor. It used to be the real sort of, you know, poor relation arts television, didn't it, in any channel, because actually it was just seen as, you know, the good thing to do, but it wasn't necessarily the, you know, the big ratings winner or the commercial success. Have you got any money? Have you got any money for these guys to give them? Have you? Let's hear it then.
Yeah, we've got money. We've got money. We commission single films for seasons. We commission scripted. We commission long-running things. We commission really big shows like Landscape.
How much money have you got?
What's the channel budget?
Yes, what's your arts budget? I'd love to hear them.
I don't think I'm allowed to say.
Yes, you are. We won't go any further in this room.
I will, if I'm allowed to, I'll tweet it later. But because the channel's merged from 2 to 1, I can't. Not sure.
Look, what's said in Sheffield stays in Sheffield.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And it's being recorded.
We don't disclose it, partly because money chases projects, right? So there's a sort of, there's just not a fixed limit on it, right? If I bring enough good ideas, they will get spent. In fact, my best experience at I've spent everything from £10,000 to £1 million on a project at Channel 4. I mean, not just arts projects, but other stuff. So it totally goes with the thing. But the best experience I had was on Gay Wedding when I was talking to David Glover about it, and I had to tell him how much it cost. And he said, "Oh my God, don't tell Jay, that's so expensive. We're never going to get that through."
How much was it?
I'm not going to say, but it was expensive.
Oh,
right?
don't do that. That's like
The two of us then went to see Jay and said, Jay Hunt, who runs the channel, and said, you know, we want to do this thing. It's a bit crazy, but it's really amazing, and it's really expensive. And she just took a sort of object on the desk and said, "Okay, here's that money. Have a bit more if you want. I think probably take a bit more. But take that money. There it is. You can spend that once this year. Go away, sleep on it. Come back, tell me if this is the thing." And that's brilliant. I mean, that's the kind of empowering, you know. So I think that's kind of our model.
Okay, yes. How about everyone else? Do you spend much? No?
We do, but we're a little different, is that the fact of most of our big series, we fund those series, and the producers actually bring us projects. Okay. So, I mean, bring us the series. I know what they're spending, I know what they're spending it on. So for a single series and specials, yeah, we have money to do. It depends on where it fits in the slot. If it doesn't fit at all, sometimes most of the things I say no to are things that people clearly have not been watching PBS, and they'll pitch something that just is not going to fly.
Monkey tennis.
Yeah, we have money.
Yeah, but I mean, it's supposed to be at the centre of your heart of the BBC. Is he Tony put his money where his mouth is? Art.
Yeah, I think we put quite a lot into the arts, and obviously the budgets on BBC One and BBC Two tend to be a bit bigger than the budgets on BBC Four. But there are, you know, a very large number of hours to fill every year. I'm still looking for projects in 16, pretty much spent up this year. But do come to me with the sort of projects that you think I'll like. I think on the whole, the more specifically it is about a particular artist and their work, and that artist isn't particularly well known, then it's probably BBC Four, and the budgets are going to probably be quite tight and challenging, but that's probably not a terrible shock to you all.
Andy?
I can say how much we've got.
Yay!
We've got 3.5 million, but we leverage off state funding bodies, which, I mean, you've got your budget, I know, is... It's in the press. It's been in the press.
Which budget?
It's 16 million, isn't it?
Pounds.
It's been in the press.
There's someone in the press there. I'm not going to go there.
We get state funding money, we get federal funding money.
Straight talking is true.
Playing that the straight back.
I do wonder if indies have sort of got used to the idea that arts programming are underfunded, so they don't really kind of go mental with big crazy ideas. And I think
you can't blame them for that, because
no, I can't. I really can't blame them for that. But as a plea, for Sky particularly, I'd really like people to be liberated from that, because as you say, we'd much rather put a whole load of money into something that we think is really massive and we totally believe in, than lots of sort of itty-bitty bits, and so please be liberated by sort of not thinking that arts programming can't be massive and expensive.
It's true, isn't it? It's easier to say. I'm going to chip in on that, because I think itty-bitty bits are important too, because I think sometimes that artist who's starting out, you want to capture them on camera, and hopefully in 20 years' time somebody's going to go, I'm so glad they made that little film about that artist who I hadn't quite heard of but I'm really interested in now. But I do think it's important for us to get the range, and I think it's important for the BBC to, I am trying to save more money for some bigger projects to get the range more, because I think it's quite easy to, as time is tight, times are hard, we have to be careful that we don't spread the money over the same number of projects all the time and find that it's getting tighter and tighter. I think it's important to save up for some big projects.
You're such a broadcasting liberal Democrat, right?
Am I? I'll take that as a compliment.
Okay, I'm going to put the lights up because it's your chance to ask some questions before we lose everyone to the ice cream van that's obviously drawn up outside.
That's what they're all going for. It's not me. It's
so we've got roving mics. If you put your hand up, and when the mic comes, if you don't mind saying who you are, that's really, really helpful. So has anyone got a question for any of our incredibly eminent panel?
It's one on the front row, Muriel.
Yeah, but all right, there's a little lady here. Thank you very much. If you don't mind telling us who you are.
Bless you for the little. My name's Maureen Murray and Foxtrot Films. So where are we at with the possibilities of co-production? Where are we at with the possibilities of theatrical windows? Because as we know, there's now been a big shift towards the cinema, particularly for singles and feature length. And I'd like to know where all of you are at with that. I know about Donald because we've worked with Donald.
That's right.
But I'd love to know where the rest of you are at with that.
Thanks. Do you want to start?
We do a lot of co-productions because it's a way of leveraging money. So we're always looking, but we have to have Australian content in there, and it can be very tangential, but it's part of the remit of the ABC. And we're very generous about theatrical windows because we want filmmakers to bring us really good ideas, but often they get turned into a 1 hour as opposed to their 90-minute film. And we negotiate the theatrical window with them.
Yeah, we co-pro. We don't have a problem with theatrical window beforehand, so that's not a problem for us. And then also we're trying to do a thing called hot tickets at the moment, which is to try and bring the hottest show that month to our audience. And so there's a different rights position on that, because obviously there's we don't want the broad range that we normally do. So there's all sorts of different ways that we can, basically if it's an idea we love, we'll find a way of doing a deal, basically.
I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, I suspect we're going to say, I'm having coffee with Mandy after this, so I'll tell you about Copra after that. But, we do it, but obviously if we're trying to do things that other people aren't doing, it's trickier, but we're all up for it. I'm out for it in principle. And theatrical windows we do all the time for factual and arts things, so yes, whatever works.
What's BBC's?
Yeah, as Don said, we have a tie-up with PBS already. We will be co-proing with them. We do co-pro with a range of people. I co-pro with a range of people. Most of what I do is still fully funded, and that's probably not surprising to you all. But in terms of co-proing, we will co-pro from from an international broadcaster through to, we might do something in association with NT Live, who now effectively run as production companies themselves, or they may even have platforms of their own. So I think the game is changing, and I think we have to be quite open-minded about it. I think we have to be quite careful. When it comes to the BBC, I think theatrical holdback is tricky to get it right. I think that, sometimes a big cinema release, if it's quite quickly followed on by a TV broadcast, can feel quite good. You can think, I missed that in the cinema, and there it suddenly is on the telly. That feels great. Sometimes if you have to wait 2 years for holdback, you think, oh my God, surely everyone's seen that on DVD by now. I think that can be a trouble for me, really. I'd rather not wait for ages.
I do think that negotiation is tricky, but it can be done quite effectively because you end up with a marketing and promotional campaign that is in tandem, and you know what you're getting. So sometimes one hand washes the other. I think it's a great idea.
Right, great. This lady here, just behind you. Thanks. Just in the second row. Thanks.
Hi, Eve Wood, filmmaker. How much do season ideas affect your programming? So you've got single documentary ideas, but sometimes you might have an idea for a season, you know, like a jazz season or blues season and stuff. So how much, and then is there any way of finding out what your season is, what you're planning for next year, and whether you can come up with ideas for that?
Yeah, we do. Our sort of more of our factual strategy is based a lot around seasons. So we've got a sex season coming up in July, and then we've got a failure season, hopefully not connected. We were going to do madness, and then we thought that was far too autobiographical, so we changed it. And then actually we are going to be looking for ideas for a Celtic season coming up soon. So. Yes,
careful.
For you. So that's really, really important for us. But we are also open to people pitching ideas to us, or if there is a really, really strong central piece that we love, then we might decide to build something around that. So absolutely.
And now you're sort of open for suggestions for a season, is that what you're saying? So if you're saying I've got an idea, maybe you could do a season around it, or...
Well, I think you have to come with an idea. Just send me, would you like to do a season on...
And I've got a programme for it.
Something, that might be a bit vague, but because we can probably think of that ourselves. But if you've got something that's specific or talent or access that enables that season to feel purposeful, then we would do it with you rather than a whole load of other people.
Yeah, we do quite a lot of seasons, particularly joining up BBC Two and BBC Four, where you might get a single film on BBC Two, followed by a cluster of programmes around it on BBC Four. Sometimes they're quite loosely themed. You know, the slow season was more of a style of programme making than a subject area. But we're doing theatre and got all sorts of plans going forward. What normally happens is the way they're made is, truthfully, it's not us in our sort of dastardly lair dreaming up brilliant season ideas which are then trying to keep from you. But quite often what happens is two programmes come in and you kind of think, actually, if we put them together, it'll feel a bit bigger and then maybe get something else around it. So it's often quite happenstance the way it comes about. And rather than tell you now what all the seasons are for the next year, if anybody's got any ideas for seasons, come and see me and I will respond individually. Because otherwise I have had, I've been in these situations where I've said, and next year we're doing the following, and literally, 750 proposals later and everyone's disgruntled. I'd rather hear the breadth of your interests than the specificity of mine.
I can say sometimes, at least for us, is that we end up having, we may actually come up with seasons that's based on history, some sort of historical time. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated, we actually did an entire week of programs. So we did the history of JFK. We actually did science on the bullet that killed him. So all of a sudden, you start to think of how you can do it. We've got a huge Vietnam series coming up in 2017 with Ken Burns that will dominate the schedule for 2 weeks. But we're actually doing some musicals based on, if someone can tell me how I can get Miss Saigon, I would kiss you, as a matter of fact. But, in that case, we wrap it around into a campaign.
Right, great.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, we don't do many. It's a bit like Mark says when they do come about. But that said, anything that makes the impact of a programme bigger is good. So if we can group things, then we'll do that. I suppose for us, it's less a question of sort of seasons, sort of abstractly chosen subjects, and more a question of sort of thinking journalistically about what's in the air, what's current. So if you want to try and think, what area of the Channel 4 going to be sort of looking for, it's usually good to sort of ditch the review section of the paper and look at the front section of the paper, and then just follow that and think, okay, what would the artistic angle on those subjects be?
No? Yeah, yep. We do. We're doing a mental health season. We've got an arts programme going out in that.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting. That was actually a question I was going to ask earlier, but I'm going to let this gentleman ask a question first, but remind me to come back to it, because it's about whether arts programming is proactive or reactive to actually the real world, and that's actually quite important. That's sort of encompassed by that question. The gentleman here first.
I have a small question concerning the system of anniversaries. Last year, it's a specific question for Mark Bell from BBC. For example, when a program or a proposal is given to BBC and after some time there is no response coming, and but you no. And
the BBC didn't respond.
You're seeing all my dirty laundry in one go.
Right in there, didn't you?
I thought this was going to be a positive question.
And if BBC comes up with a small program concerning the same anniversary, could there still be interest of BBC to widen it up, to make the anniversary with not only one product, but, for example, several audiovisual products?
Yes, that is the answer. The anniversaries are tricky because, you know, they're a really useful way of clustering programs around a moment. So, you know, First World War's been a big thing. Jubilees are always big. You know, we celebrate centenaries all the time. I have endless lists provided to me by some of the research teams of all the anniversaries coming up for the next 5 years. And yes, they're handy, but sometimes it's kind of, when it's the 75th anniversary of somebody being born, when in fact, actually you think, shouldn't we be celebrating their birth, or should we be celebrating their amazing book or, you know, theatre piece or output or something? I think you have to find relevant anniversaries. Sometimes the anniversary becomes a partnership thing. You know, the Shakespeare 400 next year is going to be a big deal, and there's going to be a lot of it about. That ends up being something that happens across radio, online, television, drama, the RSC, other parties get involved, and so suddenly you find yourself with an enormous, great bag of ideas, out of which we can only take a small portion. But there's often quite a big hiatus. As soon as the season starts being invented, then there's a huge amount of jockeying around, deciding what we'll do and how best to get the balance for the thing. So there is sometimes a bit of a weight involved there, because more people get involved in the decision making, to be honest.
Was that Muriel getting back to him?
It's an excuse. It's not a very good excuse, but
I
I'm
put
doing
something
my
in
best.
1976. I'm hoping to hear next week.
But you know, but there is this problem: is that you get one single show in. And then what do you do with it? Because, you know, you try to find a place for it, and if there's not a decent place to put it, you can't promote a single show because it's so expensive. So then you end up putting it there and hoping that audience will find it. So that's why sometimes an anniversary...
In a way, to get back to that question I asked just before the gentleman brought this up, is that thing about reading the front page of The Guardian rather than the arts review section is really crucial, because actually the ideas that everybody's looking for, both as a commissioner and a viewer, are things that you haven't thought of, a take on the world, which is actually what the arts encompasses. It's about describing the human condition, if we can be a little bit profound about it for a minute. And that comes not from chasing a season or trying to fit something into, you know, a round peg into a square hole. It comes from actually trying to express yourself, pitching it to you, and then you decide, presumably, how that fits into your schedule or your remit. Am I right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, I spent my first 3 years in telly as on Newsnight. I never quite got over that kind of asking why now about things. And it's the only route to sort of, you can have originality for the sake of it, but it's like ideas that feel like they've been come up with in a white room with no windows. You just sort of think, like, well, you could do that, you could do something, you could do anything, that sort of thing. Whereas if you just have a reason why it's the right time to do the idea, you're already halfway there, I think. That's a big part of it.
Yeah. Is there anybody else? So, Dark, another question? Yes? Hang on, just wait for the mic. Thanks.
Well, just to agitate over that a little bit, my name's Louise Rosen. Isn't that why anthologies come up? Is the idea that you can promote the slot, promote the strand, and then you develop an audience that wants to come to it because they know that when they do, they're going to be pleased by it, or at least a good number of them will be pleased by it. So I sometimes wonder about the argument against the singles unless they fit into this other rubric of, you know, anniversary, season, blah, blah. You know, I guess I think of Arena. I mean, for me, Arena was the place to go. It was the address for arts programming.
Yeah. Well, we have a number of addresses for arts programming, of which Arena is still a part. I think that singles are still important. I think trying to find, you know, strands play an interesting, you know, strands both enable you to do a range of singles, but also, hopefully, create a brand strong enough to deliver people into it because of the status of the brand. But it's often easier, if you're trying to market something, you're either marketing the brand and here's a whole range of Storyville or Imagine or Arena, and isn't it great? Or if you have a set of programs around a particular subject. You can do a specific trail which goes, you know, it's 300 years since the Georgians were in power or first came to Britain, and here's a little range of programs that, you know, celebrate that. And that's, you know, you can do a nice little trail for that, and it's quite a useful way. You've just got a one-off. It's quite hard to find the trail space for them, so it's about trying to get more noise to the programs, really.
I think it's also about different ways of consuming art. So we're just about to launch, I think it's probably Europe's biggest download offering for the arts. So there's a linear channel, but also, you know, it's a Wednesday night, you might be in the mood for something in particular, and so, you know, you can go into our download offering, and if you are a fan of, I don't know, classical music, you can click on that, and there's a vast offering of content for you. And I think that's the other thing, that you have to understand how people consume art and consume entertainment and consume content now. It's fundamentally different, and I think we're going to learn an awful lot about this download offering we're giving to people, about how we drive audiences from one thing to the other, and what they consume, and how much, and are they binge viewing it. And so I think it's going to be fascinating for us to learn how to reach an arts audience in a completely new way through that method.
Also, here's an opportunity to myth-bust that idea that I'm sure loads of programming filmmakers have, that they've got to bring you the talent. They've got to bring you this. It's all going to be fronted by Grace. And I'd go, oh, would you like to have a 5-part series about Dostoevsky? You go, no. I go, it's got Russell Crowe in it. You go, yes, please. And so, you know, but I mean,
Sorry.
This is off the top of my head, sorry. But I mean, is that a myth? Because I mean, a hell of a lot of people, you know, small independents think that. They think, oh God, right? They think up the idea. They go, they're only going to buy it if Bruce Willis does it, or, you know, or Martin Clunes is going to do a voice. So I mean, is that true?
Half of it's a myth for us.
Half of it's a myth?
Right, so the bit that's a myth is they've got to be famous. Because I just don't think we're going to sell that much on famous people. I mean, not enough of the people we're interested in are famous. In the kind of way that telly famous, I mean. And so we try and sell things on subject matter, or sort of, you know, I mean, it's like, but we do really want an authored take on things. So it does have to have a sort of an animating intelligence behind it. You know, there has to be a creative person driving it for us.
I think it's got to be authentic. That's the
well, I was just going to say that you can really fall down a, you know, sort of a black hole with that one if the person isn't actually seen as being authentic. I mean, I've got an example in mind, but I'm not going to be cruel. But I mean, you've got to be absolutely spot on there. That's dangerous.
Yeah,
no,
but
it can seem to be patronising if the person actually ends up not being an expert and they just look like the token person.
It depends whether they're delivering you a lecture or sort of showing you a bit of their world. I mean, I sort of think that we don't really do a lot of that kind of to tell people didactic, sort of top-down lecturing type of telly. We do people sort of sharing their experience with us. So you don't have to be an expert to share your experience. You just have to have an interesting experience in an intense sort of place.
Yeah. I think for me it's the way that you tell the story more than who's the star attached to it, or and the star can be attached to it, but it has to be, you know, it has to really jump out at you as an idea in terms of the way the story is told, as well as the idea itself.
So you were going to say?
I just think it's about credibility. I mean, you know, when we got John Hamm and Daniel Radcliffe to do Young Doctor's Notebook, I mean, they just happened to share a love of a reasonably obscure Russian playwright. And so we would never have got them to do that unless they genuinely were passionate about it. And I think it's that authenticity that actually an arts audience is generally pretty smart. They can sniff out bullshit a mile off. So I think if you are cynical about casting talent for the sake of it, it just doesn't work. They just reject it.
I think that, you know, it's finding the right talent with the right subject. And, you know, I mean, in my little clip thing, there was a bit of Andrew Marr painting a picture. And what he was doing in that was he was looking at Churchill's life and the way Churchill used painting as a kind of release from the pressures of the day job. And Andrew talks very movingly in that about having a stroke and going back to painting after that stroke, as Churchill himself did. And you get this rather interesting perspective on Churchill, who may or may not be a great painter. I think that's, you know, jury's out on that one. But you get a very clear vision of a man and his, the challenges he went through from an extra, more textured perspective. And I think that's what we're looking for. There are some people like Michael Palin who bring an audience and they're almost interesting on anything they're interested in, because they bring a kind of, you know, an enthusiasm and ability to communicate that I'm always sort of keen on. It doesn't mean we'd give him free rein to do whatever he wanted, but we're pretty open to his suggestions.
He's one of the few people that can pull it off, though. these days. I mean, because Michael Palin's known in the United States, so we will actually take a program.
Got a nice program for you.
That's how it really works.
Sorry, you were
I
going to
was
say.
just going to say, if you've got Renaissance writers as your subject, you probably want Andrew Marr to get an audience to it. If you've got access inside the International Space Station, you probably put an unknown artist in it. It's sort of like the classic sort of balancing act. You just have something that pulls you in. It doesn't have to be the talent, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Well, here's a question. Again, not trying to be too profound about it, but I mean, the people in this room, attending this festival, lots of people make documentaries that try and change the world. I mean, they really do change the world. They actually make people think about the nature of what it's like to be alive and what we're doing and how we're messing things up. Just be honest. Does arts television do that? Because artists believe they change the world. Does your representation of it on television change anything?
We've got a couple of series on PBS, one called Independent Lens and the other POV. And many of those, and these are social change documentaries, and many of them are about artists. Ai Weiwei, or we've got one called Cutie and the Boxer, which are really good. So we do air those in an independent television slot. And so whether or not they're called art, they may be, at that moment, we consider them independent films. So I do think that you can change the world with art, and there's a place for it.
Yeah, because for instance, I'm thinking about that Brilliant Gay Wedding musical. That was a real political edge, because it was a fantastic idea to make people engage with the social change that had happened, but through the medium of musicals. So, were you trying to do that?
Absolutely, explicitly, of course.
Did you see what I'm guessing at? Because they're not just entertainment, and it's the difference between sort of buying an IKEA piece of decoration, and looking at a really difficult piece of art, and there's room for both, I know, but it's quite important to actually feel that you're moving something on.
I totally agree. That's what motivates me. But equally, it didn't feel like a sort of tub-thumping bit of agitprop, did it? It was a very joyful, sort of pleasurable, emotional sort of thing. But it did have that moment where Andy Bell sang A Little Respect, and they put up this sort of milestones in sort of gay rights history. So I think that's incredibly important. I just think back to Orgreave, right? So when we did the screening here last year with Jeremy Deller, he said that his motivation for doing it was it was like one of those moments where the police reconstruct a crime to jog people's memories, right? And that's how it felt watching it. And the showroom cinema was full, 300 people, really angry still. Okay, it didn't sort of reverse history, but it did change minds and it changed perceptions.
I don't think there's enough of it. I would love more people to be provocative and stir things up and have opinions and ideas. And it feels quite soft out there at the moment.
Well, that brings me to something that two almost awful words, and this is like to everybody, is self-censorship. That's often what you have to face, is everybody in the room thinking, oh God, no. And they've censored their ideas before they come to you because they think they know what you want. Yeah. Now, how do you get over that? How do you go, look, do not censor your wildest, maddest ideas because that's what you want? It's really difficult. They've got businesses to run. They've got lives. They've got mortgages.
Yeah, and there are some things that it's going to be difficult to say yes to, let's be honest. I agree. Provocation is great, but, there are some fairly strict guidelines and we have to abide by them, and it can be quite difficult, and so sometimes it will lead to a tough conversation.
No? Well, yes, we've got Ofcom, blah, blah, blah. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the idea that's exciting, that's going to make us feel nervous.
Absolutely.
That
is the reality.
I'm not talking about self-censorship here.
We all know that's the reality, but if you start with the reality, how the hell are you going to change anything? Let's start with the idea, let's start with creativity, and then we can support you to get it on air. That's much more interesting way round of doing something for me.
Exactly. We have guidelines in favour of provocation, so if you've got a provocative idea, please bring it on. It's set in the remit. It does say that.
What I was trying to say was...
It's a sweet little guideline. Was it again? It's the three things you
make trouble, do it first, inspire change. That's our motto. Sort of make trouble. That's the first bit.
What I was trying to say was, I'm not saying don't come to me if you've got something provocative. I was just trying to say there are various guidelines out there, and let's not kid ourselves that they don't exist. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to be able to have a conversation with you and say, sadly, I don't think this one's for me at the end of it, if it's a difficult, really, really difficult piece that we simply can't do. If it's about paedophilia, for instance, I probably won't be interested.
You do. Go out and get drunk, but be home at
even with PBS, is that we love to have those big series come our way, and documentaries that are over the top or that push the boundaries. You have to manage it. And I think you're right. I mean, come to us with the creative ideas, but we have to, you know, the PR people say that you just have to manage how it works.
I'm in the middle of a film about Scientologists, so, you know, I'm chilled about all sorts of things.
Well, they're going to be after you, lady.
Scientology. Oh, is Tom Cruise on your show?
Have we any more questions at all here? Yes, the lady down at the front, 2 secs. It's coming your way.
Did you work on that?
Hi, thanks. Just on that, I'm wondering, in terms of what the politics of the time are, how much does that influence what you're able to commission and how you can present it?
Politics of the timeline.
Yeah, what do you...
Like, I'm from Australia, and I think that there's been a lot of arts funding cut this year.
All right, you're talking just right across the board, and it's like austerity, for instance, why would people be spending money on arts?
But also, what their sort of perspective is, and what the political agenda is.
Is there a political agenda across? I mean, obviously the BBC has to be political because, you know, charter renewal coming up and everything, there's a great big beady eye on you, but I don't think everybody else does.
We're not sort of partisan. We've sort of got a broad troublemaking remit, but that's different from being sort of behind one sort of angle. I don't sense any sort of censorship yet, and I've got internally feel great deal of freedom and backing to do sort of crazy stuff. So that doesn't feel like it's a problem yet.
And everybody thinks the BBC are biased. Everybody. So clearly, it's just like every single opposing view think they're biased.
Agreed on that at least. Yeah, so that's something. Yeah, no, I think that I suppose with there are cuts in cultural the activities around the country, and I think that the BBC is therefore trying as much as it can to celebrate the arts and champion them around the country. Does it change the way we approach arts programming? Up to a point. I think we are partnering more with institutions who are trying harder to find a voice and a broader audience, and that means that we are probably entering into close negotiations with some of the arts institutions.
Yeah. You could also argue, though, of course, that austerity actually is the time when people actually turn to the arts mostly because they need some kind of joy and meaning in their life. That's a way of that. Yes, Martin.
Well, just taking off of your comment about pedophilia, Sally Mann, the photographer, who now has a book out reflecting back on that time in the 90s. Yeah. And of course, when her original book came out, it was a firestorm of controversy.
I was making a topical program at the time. It was challenging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you were presented with an idea for a Sally Mann film now that did share the photographs, I mean, I'd be curious how each of you might react to it. Obviously, it's not a specific treatment, but
BBC put out a Sally Mann film, on Storyville. We certainly discussed it journalistically on a review show when there was an exhibition of photographs. So we'll find a way of, it's a big cultural story. We will find a way of discussing it, and I think you have to show without offending. And I think you're cautious, but there are ways of, giving people an idea without putting it in their face. If you see.
Did you commission Lewis Carroll?
Yes.
Well, that was pretty bold in what it showed. Yeah. I mean, Yeah. And I think, Mark, you sent me to the Saatchi Gallery to do a story about a sort of not the Sally Mann photographs, but of Tierney Guerin.
Yeah, Tierney Guerin, that's right. Yeah, that was a move
when I was working for
back in those days.
People do get more cautious on it. But there's an air of caution and, instant offence these days as well, which, I mean, I'm always like to tell our students at Glasgow School of Art that that's where self-censorship comes in, that everybody now is offended. They're professional people for being offended. So I think that, when Channel 4 started in the 80s, there was none of that about. And social media's got a great deal to do with that too, hasn't it? So that really is affected. I've just got time for more questions. I'm just going to wrap up with a final point. Yes, sir, 2 secs. Just wait for the microphone.
Just want to ask about when everyone mentions broadening the representations of class and diversity and stuff like that on telly, but to me it often feels like, regardless of stuff like the Big Gay Wedding and Latino Michael Jackson tributes, that those aren't like incidental depictions of these people of these types of people in shows. They're massive testaments to, the word gay and Latino is in the title. Do you not sometimes feel like that's almost like tokenism, or you're really trying to make a big deal of the fact that you're putting a gay person on screen when it should be incidental? it shouldn't, that, you know, their characters shouldn't be defined by their sexual orientation or their ethnicity.
Right, I think you're all committed to diversity anyway, aren't you? Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, we all need to do more. None of us is doing enough, and that's why we've all announced programmes to try and tackle it. And I agree. I mean, I sort of think on the specific issue of the gay wedding, there's moments when it's relevant, and there's moments when it isn't. And the moment when gay marriage becomes legal is a moment when it's relevant to me, and that was a decision taken in consultation with the grooms. But I agree that you look at the casting for the Grayson series, or the casting for the Vote, or the sort of track record of Random Acts. We're trying to do a lot in the way of sort of just casting to reflect the diversity of this country without making a sort of big deal of it. I just think you've got to sort of go case by case a bit.
Yeah. I think it's pretty much across the board.
No, I think you're right, but I can tell you that almost nothing gets discussed more than anything in diversity, and yet though you can still get a backlash that's subtle, that you don't think is coming, but I agree with you. I mean, it's tough, but that you have to do it.
Yeah. I just we're really out of time. I just really wanted to finish off with just a sense of the health of it right now, and just what's going to happen in the next year, because I'm still slightly concerned about your comment earlier at the beginning of the session about coming and ask me next year, because that sort of indicates to me that you're just not entirely happy with the way it's going at the moment. How do you feel, just to go around you one by one, that is it in a healthy place? Do you think when we are hopefully back here next year again, that you'll actually be able to say that was an absolutely belter of a year for the arts and for society in general, or have you got reservations about what's happening?
I think for public service broadcasters, there's always the threat of kind of government cuts to funding. We've had massive cuts to funding. BBC, case in point. The spotlight is on them, and it's. I don't think you're ever safe, not in that arena, and I really worry about. And we cannot cut our budget anymore, because it won't be worth having an arts department if we do. So I don't think it is. It's always in a precarious place.
I think we're in Rude House. We're making bigger channel, we're moving up the EPG, we're making it more focused, we're giving it more marketing, we're going Europe-wide, so Sky, we're going pretty mental on the arts, and we're really excited about it. I just really feel that I want to see as much agitation and as much creative innovation to go alongside our ambitions too. So I suppose that's what I'm appealing for, is that, don't be self-censoring, go mental, think of big stuff, think of crazy stuff, and we are totally open for that, and for just generally, leading the way, keeping the bar high, and sort of trying to sort of be the trailblazers of arts programming.
Yeah, I feel bullish about quantity and about quality, and we've had the most amazing year. We had the GRIS and the RTS, the BAFTA. We've got a lot more to come. We've sort of got to make sure that's the sort of launch pad rather than a high watermark for us. The bit I worry about slightly is innovation. I sort of think there could be more of that. We're plugging away at it as hard as we possibly can. I sort of just, and I can sort of see promises of it elsewhere, but I just think we could all be, trying a bit harder to sort of push the boundaries.
I think it's a really, a challenging time for arts broadcasting. I think it's a stimulating one. I think that what's happening in the way, Celia alluded to the ability, the menu, the fact that you can download stuff when you want it, the fact that if you like the arts, you'll probably able to go and find something you want somewhere. I think that's terrific, but that in the end becomes a sort of self-defining thing that I think it's important to keep the surprise there too. I would hope that as BBC Arts develops, and the iPlayer means that there's often lots of things you can find when you want in the arts, I hope that doesn't become a sort of self-defining thing where people who like arts just go there. And I hope that we will be able to continue to sit in the heart of the schedule on broad channels that lots of people watch, to encourage as many people as possible to take the journey further onto the iPlayer and elsewhere. So, surprise me with some inviting projects.
Never heard that before.
I'm not worried so much. I think we do more arts programs than anybody in America, as a matter of fact. So it seems to be what they just did a survey that asked where you would find arts programs in the States, and 99% of the people interviewed said PBS. So I think, though, I wish that would sometimes translate into viewers, as a matter of fact. And where are they? But But I think though, and you know, like John, I wish sometimes, you know, we sometimes, you know, we do great regular arts programs, whether it's dance and, you know, we do all the things you expect us to do. And yet though, I think every time we try to do something that's really edgy or really out there, our viewers don't come. You know, our viewers are plus 60 years old. So we have to make sure that we do programs that invite the core to stay and then to get brand new viewers. I mean, Downton Abbey, as a matter of fact, is a clear example of the fact that the core PBS audience comes in droves to Downton Abbey. But now, because it's become such a phenomenon, everyone is watching Downton. Whether or not you're young, you're old, you're black, everyone's watching Downton. So I wish, though, we could figure out a way to get that to happen with all of our arts programs. Our arts programs are small, and they are loyal, and they tune in every week, as a matter of fact. But again, though, they're different. They're not coming to see, if they're jazz, they're going to turn off the dance. But they stay, the audience is consistent, as a matter of fact, and we're happy with it. But we're not happy with it. But I don't think we're in jeopardy. Right, well, that's we'll give it a year. We'll come back and we'll see if we're more cultured and we've moved the world on. I love the way that today's panel has actually been representative of what we're talking about. We lost half our audience halfway there.
Look at the voicing.
And you've been left with the quality ones, exactly.
You stayed to the credits. How much they get?
You stayed to the credits. So listen,
we're
thank
so
you.
proud of you guys.
A big thank you to you, a big thank you to the panel.